Okay, so this afternoon we have Louise Harrison with us. Louise is Save the Sound's Long Island Natural Areas Manager and a conservation biologist. She served on Long Island in federal, New York State, and Suffolk County agencies. She's held leadership positions for environmental organizations and led task forces and community coalitions in protecting open space and co-chaired a broad community movement that saved Stony Brook's last forest. Louise has extensive experience working to protect Long Island's coastal communities and natural ecosystems, from the boroughs of New York City to Montauk and Orient Points. And she's received numerous awards, more than I will list out for you this afternoon, for open space preservation. Working with Save the Sound, Louise coordinated the Plum Island Coalition and successfully campaigned to save Plum Island from federal auction block. But there's more to be done to ensure its protection. We still have work ahead of us. Louise has been very busy doing that. And I'll let her tell you more about that this afternoon now. Louise, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody. I'm so glad you're here today and you decided to take your lunch hour to meet with me and the Save the Sound team. It would be great to have questions at the end, and I'm happy to answer them. I'd like to take you on a tour of why Plum Island is worthy of preservation and what we've been doing about this situation of protecting Plum Island for many years now. I'm introducing you to this illustration by Scott Bluedorn of East Hampton, New York. I like to explain that this is a sort of a nod to the Native American tradition of the earth arising from the sea on the back of a turtle. And being that harbor seals and some gray seals are among the most charismatic animals known at Plum Island, this illustration is, we think, quite apt and beautiful. So welcome once again. If you're new to Save the Sound, and I don't think you are, but just a reminder that we do lead environmental action in the Long Island Sound region, fighting climate change, saving endangered lands like Plum Island, protecting the Sounds and its rivers and watersheds, and working with nature to restore ecosystems. So where is Plum Island? You may have this map in the upper left-hand corner in your mind of the relationship of Long Island to Connecticut and Rhode Island. But way off the tip of the North Fork of Plum Island, where you see that red box, is where Plum Island is located. And it's part of an archipelago that extends all the way out to Fisher's Island. That's all part of New York, and it's actually all part of the town of Southold, which predominates the North Fork of Long Island and goes out to include Fisher's Island. You may have seen this much of Plum Island in the past if you came over to Long Island using the Cross Sound Ferry out of New London. Or if you're planning on it, this is what you'll see as you pass by through Plum Gut, the Plum Island Lighthouse, through these turbulent oxygenated waters. But today you're going to see a slightly different view of Plum Island, a virtual tour. And I hope to take you through the various parts of it, explain why we're protecting it, and bring you up to date on our campaign. This is a rather oblique view. It's on an angle from the air. On the map, you saw that Plum Island was shaped a little bit like a pork chop. Here it looks a little spread out, but that's just an artifact of the angle it was taken on. So this is a view east from Plum Gut, looking east over Plum Island. If you can see my cursor moving on the screen, over here on the left is where the Plum Island Animal Disease Center is. Down here is that lighthouse you just saw. Over to the right is the entrance to the harbor, where the workers come and go every day, even today. Plum Island is still in operation. This area with the stripe through it is a large freshwater wetland you'll see more of later. A water tower central, and then going all the way out to this point. Beyond is Great Gull Island, Little Gull Island, and Fisher's Island. Again, Plum Island is part of an important archipelago. The New York Natural Heritage Program conducted a 4-season inventory of Plum Island and determined that there were at least 25 different ecological communities on Plum Island, but 5 of them were most significant because they were large and virtually untouched, in wonderful shape. They considered them to be the most significant. This photograph by Bob Lorenz captures 2 of them right away, which are maritime beaches and an extensive maritime dune community of over 100 acres in pristine condition. Again, some more of the maritime dunes and maritime beaches, but out to the maritime bluffs. Some of them are up to 70 feet high. A gorgeous array of bluffs along the south shore of Plum Island. Some more dune land looking out to the east along the bluff line and out to the point. A closer look at one of the maritime bluffs with these wonderful bank swallow nests right under the top line. These nests go way back in. They're like a tunnel network where bank swallows make their nests. And this is an unusual feature. You don't see these in all bluffs. And of course, the rocky shoreline below. The marine rocky intertidal zone is also somewhat rare on Long Island. And here it's a very healthy ecological community on the north shore of Plum Island. And here you see one of the New York Natural Heritage Program's scientists doing an assessment of the species in that zone. And the 5th of the 5 ecologically most significant features of Plum Island, according to the New York Natural Heritage Program, are marine eelgrass meadows, which are, as many of you people know, incredibly important to the marine ecosystem as nursery grounds for shellfish, crustaceans, and fish. Around the world, submerged aquatic vegetation is in trouble because we've developed our coastlines worldwide. There's sedimentation into the coastlines, and it clouds the water, blocking light from these very important submerged aquatic vegetation communities. We have 3 healthy marine eelgrass meadows at Plum Island. A 97-acre freshwater wetland is on Plum Island. I showed it to you briefly a moment ago. If you really think about it, an island surrounded by salt water needs something for animals to drink. And that's one of the reasons Plum Island is so important for wildlife, is this 97-acre freshwater wetland there that scientists have only just begun to study. In 2019 and 2021, Save the Sound and the New York Natural Heritage Program teamed up to send scientific divers around Plum Island. And they discovered what some of them had already suspected, that Plum Island's underwater lands are rich in ecological communities. So sometimes when we think about an island, we think of it popping out of the water, but we don't think about the part of an island that's under the water. And here, every bit of hard surface around Plum Island under the water has been populated by organisms. In this particular photo, you can see colonial sponges and bryozoans, which are actually animals. They look like ferns or feathers here. They're actually animals that are attached to the rock base below. And these are northern star coral, but you'll see another picture of that soon, and marine sponges. And here you see the northern star coral polyps popping out of their housing and filtering the water to feed. You can learn more about the explorations in the underwater lands around Plum Island by looking up this webinar on YouTube. And there also are publications about this exploration at the New York Natural Heritage Program's website. The bird species on Plum Island really set it apart. And I'm going to ask you for a moment to imagine a map of North America, including Canada and Alaska and all the way up to the Arctic. And think about all the different types of terrain that engender many, many different types of ecosystems and habitat for birds. Well, a quarter of those bird species that occupy those areas in North America can be found on 822 acres off of the coast of Long Island. Can you believe it? So they've actually counted up to 229 species of birds, which is nearly a quarter of all species in North America, north of Mexico. That doesn't mean they live on Plum Island. It means they've been sighted either at, on, or from Plum Island. So they might be in the air, but they were counted. And the seals, of course, the seals. The fabulous population of harbor seals that return from northern climes every year to haul out on the rocks around the south shore of Plum Island. They also go to Great Gull, Little Gull Islands, and Fisher's Island, and you probably have them where you live too. But this is the largest seal haul out area in the state of New York, and one of the largest in southern New England. Up to 600 seals have been seen here on a winter's day. Right next door is Great Gull Island, where the largest population in the world of common terns breeds, and the largest population in the Western Hemisphere of roseate terns, as you see here, breeds. And this has been, that island is owned by the American Museum of Natural History, and for many, many, many years, decades, was under the direction of Helen Hayes, known around the world for her work on terns. And why do I mention that? Because as I mentioned earlier, Plum Island is part of an archipelago of other islands. The islands interact because birds fly from one to the other. The fish swim all around the archipelago, and roseate terns that breed on Great Gull Island come and forage for sand lance and other small fishes around Plum Island. Great Gull Island may be threatened by climate change because it's a very low elevation, and we see that Plum Island might be a future refuge for a breeding grounds for roseate terns. Plum Island is also highly valued by the Montaukett Indian Nation, and we have been working with them for years now in coalition to try to protect Plum Island for the future so that Native Americans can go there, practice sacred ancient rituals, learn about their own cultural heritage, and participate in ecological restoration and protection communities, practices, as well as all sorts of stewardship activities. Now on to a slightly historical bent. When you go by on the ferry, if you come over to the North Fork, you will pass the Plum Island Lighthouse, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. This is the second lighthouse built on Plum Island. The first one was built in 1824 and had to be dismantled after a number of years. And this one built much more sturdy in 1869. It's actually in better shape than you see in this photo now, in that the cupola and the lantern room have been restored somewhat recently. And that was a project really highly desired by maritime interests and lighthouse lovers for many years. So that part's done, but there's much more to be done here. The first lighthouse was built because Plum Gut, being as turbulent as it is, actually saw about 100 shipwrecks before the people in Eastern Long Island finally got the federal government to put in a light, and things proceeded from there. This one is no longer functional. There's another one on a scaffolding now that's very modern and just does the job of providing the light. It's hardly as scenic. Fort Terry, established in approximately 1897, where negotiations for the purchase of Plum Island began, operated here until 1952. It was part of an effort, it was part of an effort to protect the coastal resources leading toward New York City. So people saw that the entrance to Long Island Sound needed to be protected, and a series of forts were built across its expansive mouth, if you want to put it that way. And Fort Terry was one of them. This was at the time of the Spanish-American War. Fort Terry never saw any action in that sense. The Spanish-American War did not come to these shores, but Fort Terry persisted through World War I and World War II as an area for training and for departures to other places, other forts and other places where war was taking place. There are remnants of it left today. They're not in good shape, and it's likely that most of these buildings will not survive into the future. They have not been maintained. There are a couple of them that we see that might be able to be reused for something in the future. So the shoreline you're seeing along the left here is the South Shore, as you're looking from somewhat central on Plum Island, looking west now over to Orient Point across Plum Gut. And over here now is where the laboratory is, just to orient you. Just some pictures, historical pictures of the troops departing from Plum Island, and a really cool picture of one of these recessed receding guns that they had at the gun batteries on Plum Island. They're considered somewhat unique. They would retract down into the ground, and an enemy ship would not know from whence the fire had come. So there are some aspects to Plum Island that the Coast Defense Study Group believes are unique in the nation. And some of these remnant pieces from World War I remain in good enough shape that the Coast Defense Study Group thinks that they are worth salvaging. Certainly celebrating. If you want to know more about Plum Island's history, this is a great book. You can get through the Southold Historical Society, hardcover and softcover, and this is very, very well researched with lots of references and notes. I think you'd enjoy it very much if you're into history, but it truly is remarkable. Most people know Plum Island because of the Plum Island Animal Disease Laboratory, where world-renowned research has been taking place since about 1954. And at first, the research was done in a converted building called Building 257, which you might have heard about if you've heard about Plum Island lore and legend. It was a converted mine and torpedo storage building where they did research for a number of years. And then this laboratory was built here on the northwest end of the island. The black-topped area here in the picture is the newest part of the lab, and it's basically administrative offices, auditorium space, and classrooms, and we see this as the most salvageable part of the laboratory. The labs themselves take up a small part of the building, and most of these large parts of the buildings are large animal holding pens. The work that was done here at the Plum Island Animal, and is still being done at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, is important worldwide because it protects our food supplies and our food economy around the world, because cloven-hoofed animals are susceptible to foot and mouth disease. And in some parts of the world, that disease is still out there in the wild and affecting animals that are used for food. Here, a vaccine was developed for that disease and African swine fever. People come from around the world to pick up vials of this vaccine, learn about the disease, and go back to their respective countries to try to fight the disease. It is of huge economic importance to our economy as well as to world economy. But the federal government decided that this work should be moved to a brand new facility, and began working on that a number of years ago to develop a new facility in Manhattan, Kansas. So this happened. Federal government decided that Plum Island could be sold to the highest bidder to help pay for the new laboratory that would be at the Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. We believe the thinking was that this isn't far from the Hamptons, and who wouldn't want an island? And they thought that there would be a lot of money available to pay for the new lab. Instead, over time, it was discovered that the new lab would be in Tornado Alley. It needed tremendous amount of reinforcement, and Congress had to appropriate money for the new lab anyway in order to build it properly and make it as tornado-proof as possible. Nonetheless, Plum Island remained on the auction block. So people started to get busy. In the town of Southold itself, the town's fathers and mothers were very concerned that the jobs that were high-quality jobs on Plum Island were going to be going out to Kansas. And so they were worried about the economic impact of that, and also concerned about the ecological consequences of Plum Island being sold to the highest bidder, perhaps for development. So they did what towns can do, and they zoned Plum Island. Of course, you can't zone federal property, but what they were doing is they created zoning that would take place if and when Plum Island ever fell into private hands. And this was a bold move. The Plum Island Research District was where the lab was, with some room around it for potential further development. And as you can see, this green area with the preponderance of Plum Island was set aside in zoning for conservation purposes. This came after extensive research by the town's own staff, and this zoning remains on the books today. It's a bold move by a very small town. This also happened. The Preserve Plum Island Coalition started to get together and started to rally and do whatever we could to turn the pages and get Plum Island off the auction block. So now, over the years, since about 2011 or 2012, we've grown to 130 regional and national organizations, all meeting through their steering committee of about 20 organizations once a month, which we have done since about 2012. Every fourth Tuesday at noon, we get together and we strategize. It's a great group, and we've really together moved pretty far. So I'm going to be telling you more about that. Save the Sound coordinates the Preserve Plum Island Coalition. Save the Sound also joined together with Peconic Baykeeper Group for the East End and 3 individuals to bring a suit against the federal government, the General Services Administration, and the Department of Homeland Security for a very poorly constructed environmental impact statement based on the future sale of Plum Island. And that moved its way through the courts, but right now is in a stay, and you'll find out why later. But this was another important move at Save the Sound in order to help stop the sale of Plum Island. A couple years later, well, around the same year actually as the lawsuit, New York decided to add Plum Island to its open space conservation plan if the Fish and Wildlife Service would not use it as a refuge. New York is now undertaking an update to the open space conservation plan. It hasn't been published yet, but all indications are that Plum Island will be mentioned yet again as of a prime interest for New York in helping to preserve. Whether New York acquires it themselves or helps manage it, it's going to be mentioned again in the update. And the coalition got together and went to Washington. We needed to get this sale mandate off the books and get Congress to listen. So we went down there and we had good meetings, but they put the ball back in our court and said, well, we're not in the business of holding on to property that has no use. So give us your plan. Tell us what you want to use Plum Island for. And so the Nature Conservancy and Save the Sound got together. We hired a consulting firm called Marstel Day that's known for taking measures to protect federal lands and put them into conservation status. They had very good success record with that. So we hired them as consultants to help us create a vision for Plum Island, and we called it Envision Plum Island. There were workshops and meetings, broad sectors, a broad array of people in various sectors brought together to discuss what they believe should be the future of Plum Island, led by Save the Sound and the Nature Conservancy. This is our meeting at Brookhaven National Laboratory. Some of you may recognize some of these prominent ecological experts here on Long Island. And Chris Kreider, who used to work at Save the Sound, leading one of the discussions. Chris was a lead in the early days of Save the Sound's work to protect Plum Island. And if you're listening, Chris, thank you. So in a nutshell and pictorial view, our concept for the future of Plum Island was as a preserve, still allowing for research capability if that could proceed. And we broke up, if you may remember the zoning map I showed you a minute ago, the two zones. This zone was for research and the rest was conservation. After we went through this exercise to envision the Plum Island's future, we realized not all parts of Plum Island were the same and had different degrees of vulnerability to visitation and use. So we thought it through this way. Right here, where the lighthouse is, should be an area just for people who are lighthouse aficionados. And there is a great population of people who just love lighthouses. And this might be even, might even turn the lighthouse into a bed and breakfast. This area would be for future research of some type. The area in the south of Plum Island here, where there's a freshwater wetland and the sand dunes and this long stretch of pristine beaches, was really delicate, is very delicate. And so we saw this as an area where researchers, ecological researchers, people practicing archaeology that was non-invasive, and others might get permits to work in here that would be non-harmful to the environment. And then perhaps occasionally docents would bring people down here on guided tours, very light on the landscape. Same thing with the East End here. There are gun batteries that people would like to visit because they're interested in old coastal defense structures and history. There are delicate ecological resources here, and there are the seals that pull out on the shoreline all along the South Shore here, as well as here. And this area could be accessible by permit or by docents leading guided tours. And the central part of Plum Island we saw as most durable. It's the part of Plum Island that's had the most use over the years. This is where Fort Terry is. There's this large area where the parade grounds were kept mown down for decades. And some of the forest here is successional, could be good places for restoration, but that it wouldn't necessarily be harmful to have people coming and going here in a sustainable way based on a management plan. Across the water, across Plum Gut, where Orient Point is also a piece of property that is part of the Plum Island property. It is their ferry access point at Orient Point. So it's a 9.5 acre parcel with a 2 acre deep water port in it, and it has some buildings in it. This had been zoned a long time ago by Southold as something that could be available for development someday. But the coalition, the Preserve Plum Island Coalition and Save the Sound, moved the town to rezone this parcel as well. And in 2019, this parcel was zoned Marine 3, a brand new category, purpose of which is for Plum Island access only. So this permanently is linked to this parcel of the Plum Island proper. And we thought that was a very good move. We support it completely. And we know actually that the Department of Homeland Security sees this as an imperative piece to keep with the rest of Plum Island so people can come and go. We also see that some of the buildings here could be reused, and one of them, the administration building, might be a future visitor center. And here's a closer look. This could be a potential museum someday, and the zoning allows for that. Again, should Plum Island ever fall into private hands, this zoning is in place. For more information on our concept, you can go to preserveplumisland.org Envision report. You can see the brochure, which is a quick look. It's a pictorial synopsis, really, of our vision, and the longer 72-page report for your inspection. Also on this website, and quite importantly, are updates to our vision, because over time, the situation has changed. And we now have some amendments to this, some of which you'll hear about. Anyway, we believe Plum Island can be preserved to preserve its ecological value, its amazing history, its cultural heritage, and it can provide ecologically sustainable access and educational opportunities. Another beautiful piece of artwork by Scott Bluedorn. And I just want you to know that when you see these kinds of line drawings here and in the reports, Scott made sure that he only depicted plants and animals that are found on Plum Island. He did his own research on that. Well, anyway, we still had this problem. Plum Island was to be sold to the highest bidder, and this was getting in the way of preservation. But fortunately, in December 2020, after presenting our vision back to Congress and back to the press and to the public, our champions in the Senate and Congress were able to overturn the language that had put Plum Island up at auction. And this was a cause for great celebration, but it did not provide for conservation. It basically just erased a couple of lines of language and said that it's not up for a public sale. That was an achievement of itself, but we still need to get Plum Island into conservation. And we have these people helping us. Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy. We have Representative Joe Courtney and Representative Rosa DeLauro and others on Long Island and in New York helping. And these are the ones who helped us get over the mark in 2020. Meantime, Department of Homeland Security is still decommissioning and trying to leave Plum Island to move out to the new lab that's already constructed, is ready for business out in Manhattan, Kansas. And the General Services Administration needs to find a new owner for Plum Island. They have issued a partial report of excess, meaning we have an intention to access this property, but they're not quite ready to do it. And our job, as we see it now, is to move the federal government into selecting an agency that will manage and protect Plum Island into the future, be its owner, and work with New York State, subdivisions of New York State, not-for-profits, and others to manage the amazing resources at Plum Island. We're looking to the Department of Interior, under which you have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service. We see that perhaps our best model for how to achieve our preserve concept really is as a national monument. And we're working very closely with the Wilderness Society, which has a fantastic record in moving federal properties into national monument status. We've learned that a national monument can be proclaimed by the president through the Antiquities Act. It need not happen through an act of Congress, although it can. But a president, under the president's own powers, can declare a national monument, and we are now in a campaign to make that happen. Why? Because it's a flexible concept. A national monument can be whatever the proclamation says it is. So we are saying we want a national monument for the purposes of ecological conservation, historical preservation, and the discovery and celebration of our shared cultural heritage. It's become our mantra. And we see these three components, these three pillars of our campaign as being achievable through the Antiquities Act. And our campaign now is primarily, but not solely, aimed at the president. Also, another outcome of Envision Plum Island is the creation of Friends of Plum Island. This is a brand new 501c3 that can receive donations, is not yet in full fundraising mode, but is getting set up ready for the moment that Plum Island would be declared a national monument or another form of preservation. We are open to other means of preservation. We are not saying this is our only idea and that's the only thing we would accept. We just see in our minds right now is the best model. We also have identified a major donor who is ready to create a fund to help with Friends of Plum Island and help with stewardship for the future of Plum Island, help with programming and stewardship activities that the federal government might not be able to undertake themselves. We also have understood over the years, as we were also, before the Plum Island's mandate for sale happened, where it was repealed, we were working on New York State to acquire Plum Island. So we have a number of contacts there, and we understand now that it worked. They're interested, not necessarily in owning Plum Island, but in helping to manage it and helping to come up with management planning for it in partnership with federal agency. So this is very positive as well. Each of these plants along the bottom were researched and drawn again by Scott Bludorn. We just love these, so I'm sorry, I keep giving him a plug, but I love them. These three women have a lot to say about the future of Plum Island. Do you know who's in the upper left? She is the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and that is Brenda Mallory. And she is part of the America the Beautiful campaign and the 30 by 30 campaign under President Biden. 30-30 campaign is to preserve 30% of America's lands and waters by the year 2030. The central woman here is our Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. And Kathy Hochul from New York in the lower right. They all are important in this movement, all very important to us. New York wrote to Deb Haaland and said, you know, we're ready to help. Keep us in the loop. And our senators have stayed with us. Their staffers have met with us numerous times. And a year ago, as of last week, a year ago, Senator Schumer's staff organized a trip of somewhere between 30 and 50 staffers from the Senate offices, from Department of Homeland Security, from General Services Administration, from Department of Interior to Plum Island, where they visited for 2 days in a row to learn more about the island with first-hand exposure and begin collaborating even more deeply with us on the future of Plum Island. They've been wonderful supporters, and they are working closely with the White House too, to try to come up with a solution for conservation on Plum Island. This happened last year. We attracted the attention of a brand new congressman here on Long Island who put in a new bill, the Plum Island National Monument Act. And look what he said in the bill: for the purpose of ecological conservation, historical. Does that sound familiar? I just said that a moment ago. They must have gone to our website, is all I can say. They pulled our exact language out and put it in the bill. We did not know this was coming, but very quickly the bill gained the support of Representative Courtney, as well as Representative Garbarino, and 2 others. It has bipartisan, bi-state support. And of course, now we have a new Congress as of this month. We do expect that Representative Lalota will reintroduce, that his staff has said they're reintroducing again. That'll probably happen in a month or 2. This, again, would be side by side with our campaign for the president to declare a national monument. And we don't see one as competitive with the other, but ultimately could actually be companion pieces. If the Congress were to also declare this a national monument, it would support any presidential proclamation. In any case, these are strong expressions of support. And we've had the same kind of support through our regional paper, Newsday, with editorials and op-eds. We all believe in the coalition that Plum Island can be preserved. It's a vision that's feasible. We know we have broad support, and we are asking any and all people to write to the president in support of a national monument. You can use your cell phone right now if you want to, and go send a message to 52886 and just type in STS in capital letters with a space, a capital P, LUM, and that will automatically send a letter to the president. Or you can go to preserveplumisland.org, and right on that front page, you can't miss it, there's a great big red button. And if you push that button, it'll bring up a letter that you can modify. You can do it on your cell phone too if you use that method. You can modify the letter or send it as is, and it will go to the White House. You can also do it the old-fashioned way, and you can take pen and paper and you can write your own letter, and this is how you would address it down in the lower left. And you just say, "Dear President Biden." Just be aware that paper letters now are held up. They're still inspecting for anthrax after all these years. It's much quicker if you click a button and send it through the website. Again, you can go to that website, preserveplumisland.org, to get updates on the campaign, read the reports, see that pictorial synopsis that we call the brochure, sign up for membership if you're in an organization. Doesn't matter what kind, but for individuals, you can sign up as an advocate. You can click the same link to sign up, but we don't consider individuals members. We consider them advocates, and the members are actually the organizations that support and are part of Preserve Plum Island Coalition. We want to thank all the supporters that helped us bring our vision into focus, and there are many of them. And I just want to acknowledge the people who provided some of the photography and art for our project, and some of which you've seen today. One of my favorite expressions in wildness is the preservation of the world. This gorgeous picture by one of our former staff members, Ariel Shearer, of geese taking off from that 97-acre pond and wetland on Plum Island. And I'm open for questions. And I'm going to ask either Amanda or Anne to read questions if they've come in by chat. Oh, it looks like there are questions.
Yes, there's a question here that you mentioned that there's still workers on Plum Island, and then you covered a little bit about the research facility. When does it close down? Do you know?
Thank you. Good question. The process of decommissioning is taking longer than anyone expected. They are still working. They still have a 24-hour-a-day operation there. Some of the employees and scientists have gone out to Kansas to scope out the new facility, figure out what they need there, order equipment and so forth. But shutting down this operation, it requires cleaning everything up, decontaminating anything that might possibly have been in the vicinity of their work on these highly contagious diseases, and making sure that old burial pits that were done around on the island are completely cleaned up as well. In the early days of the work at Plum Island on animal diseases, it wasn't entirely clear, because they were investigating it, how the disease was communicated. And there was a concern about keeping everything on Plum Island and not shipping anything out. Now we know that these diseases are born through the air column, and that with proper filtration, which is what's in effect now, the diseases can be contained, and there are containment protocols that are effective. Nonetheless, there are these areas of potential concern and some waste management areas around the island that are being cleaned up, most of which have been cleaned up, and a couple of which still need monitoring for potential groundwater concerns for a few more years. They have to be able to have a safe way to move the pathogens off the island to the new facility. They have to autoclave and clean all the facilities. And I think the final step, although I'm not positive, is to finally clean up their sewage treatment plant. So it looks as though they're not going to be leaving Plum Island until around 2028 at the earliest. That's the way people are talking about it now. We don't think that it's necessary to wait that long for the president to proclaim Plum Island as a national monument. The two don't have to be one in a sequence like that. We think it can happen as soon as he lifts pen to paper. We know of other places, such as the Castaner Range, where there's unexploded ordnance all over that have been declared a national monument. And the proclamation there describes how to move forward and do the transfer from agency to agency. We see that as a potential model for this. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks. And then do you know what are the plans for individuals to visit with their own boats to Plum Island?
Individuals can always go around Plum Island. If you are in your boat around Plum Island, someone on Plum Island will notice you. There is still tight security there. They may come up to the shoreline and look at you while you look back at them. The waterways are owned by the state of New York, and they are open to the public. You will not be able to land on Plum Island. Tours used to be available to groups, And I would say probably somewhere from around 2009 until 2018, people could sign up for a tour. I've been to Plum Island 3 times in tours. But for some reason in 2018, the Department of Homeland Security put a stop to the tours. Now elected officials can get permission to go there. As you heard, the Senate staffers went last January. There are exceptions, but at the moment, they're concentrating on decommissioning everything, cleaning it up, and moving the operation to Kansas.
Okay, we have a few more questions in chat. I'm just going to mention that we also had a couple people ask again for the number to text. So I put it in chat, but it is, was it 52886? And you text STS Plum. Yeah,
Right.
52886, text STS Plum. We also have another upcoming webinar in March. I posted information about that in the chat as well. And we have someone asking about, could you supply a direct email address to write to the president? Writing directly is the best approach over third-party links or snail mail. Calls also work very well. So I think you said that there's additional information for contacting the president on the Plum Island website. Is that right?
Well, you can press the button and those letters go to the president, and you can modify that letter. But if the whitehouse.gov itself has information on how to reach the president. But if you want to have some ammunition or some, suggested language, you can press that button without actually sending the letter, because it takes a couple of steps to actually send the letter. You can copy the letter there and paste it into your own word processing program and modify it yourself and send it any way you wish, through another method if you like. But we were suggesting this because it makes some of the points that we try to make. We also get a copy of every letter that's sent, and so we know who is sending letters. We actually also on the website, if you go to preserveplumisland.org, you'll see a tab on campaign support, and you can see the kind of support we've had over the years, as well as the names of many, many thousands of people who have written letters. We've blocked out their addresses, but their names are there. And you'll see letters from elected officials. There's a lot of good resource information in that one, and you can pick out some language for your own letter if you like. So many, many ways to do this, and it's any way you like, any way you're most comfortable. We're happy to have your support.
Okay, and then Nancy Leckerling is asking, are there invasive species on Plum Island that have been found that need cleaning up or need addressing?
Yes, there are, and you can probably see some in this picture. Like most places, most coastal places right now, Phragmites australis, which is the common reed, has invaded parts of the freshwater wetland and some of the waste areas, previously disturbed areas of Plum Island, where some kind of excavation or digging has taken place, or undevelopment of some of the buildings. There are other invasive plants there. Not strictly an invasive species, but raccoons have gotten to the island, which apparently, or at least we're guessing, have had an effect on a heron rookery and other wading bird populations, which in the 1980s were fairly strong. We think the raccoons might be eating eggs. They don't seem to be controlled there. All this leading to the need for a management plan. And one of the things we're promoting right now in our updated vision for Plum Island is the need for a special resource study of Plum Island. this is something the National Park Service would want right away, but it's also something that would be very useful to the Fish and Wildlife Service if they were interested in Plum Island. And what we're asking for is to have somebody based on Plum Island soon. They maybe find an empty office over at the lab and give them some time and space to more thoroughly inspect Plum Island for invasive species, for those areas that need immediate invasive species control or future restoration, to identify those areas where there are endangered, threatened, or rare species that need special protection. So thank you for that question.
Hey, Louise, we have 3 more questions in here, and I know we're coming up on 1 o'clock. If you have, do you have a few minutes to hang on?
I can stay on if people would like to stay on.
Okay, so for those that would like to hear the answers to a few more questions, then Nicholas is wondering, can I anchor off of Plum Island with my boat? And it sounds like from your previous answer that you probably can, but
Yes, you can. The waters are owned by the state of New York. Just be aware that you may be visited by a patrol boat, or you may have one of their security vehicles pull up along the shore and look back at you. They may use a megaphone to talk to you and ask you what your business is there. That what they don't want you to do is to pull up on the beach, and then you're talking about enforcement. But right now, there's no reason you can't be in the waters. So we spent a lot of time in these waters with our scientific dives, and we had no interference. Of course, we let them know ahead of time we would be there, but there was no interference.
okay, and then the next 2 questions are kind of related. So is it hoped that the national monument designation can be made before the presidential election? And then the next one is, and if not finished before the election, in the event the administration changes, would letters need to be resent?
Oh, I'm certain they would need to be resent, and I'm not certain that the current opponent to our current president would be in favor of preserving Plum Island. As a matter of fact, that individual in his development days wished to make Plum Island into 2 golf courses, and made that known to some of the individuals who created the Preserve Plum Island Coalition. So that is a fear. We are looking for what they call a full court press right now on our current president. And we are about to push that campaign again. We did it last year and the year before. Now we're going to be doing it again in the next couple of weeks. And when the Plum Island National Monument Act is reintroduced, we will be pushing for that as well. It's okay with us, and I think all parties understand that if something can move through Congress, and should it ever be passed there, that would bolster the president also doing that proclamation, and one would reinforce the other.
All right, thanks so much, Louise.
I'm happy to.
I'm sorry, one more question just popped
Okay.
in. It's that could it be undone? If the current administration did make it a national monument, and then after the election, could it be undone if the opponent won?
Thank you for asking that question. That happened after the Obama administration, and this concern keeps coming up. The current administration reversed it again, and yet the courts are deciding whether you can undo something that the Antiquities Act allows a president to do, but does not have a provision for undoing. We can't decide what the courts will decide, but having a bill also go through Congress would support that, because you would then have 2 of the 3 branches of government saying that Plum Island should be a national monument or should be preserved in some way. And of course, as far as national monument is concerned, that would be a presidential action or a congressional action. For Park Service or Fish and Wildlife Service, that could be more complicated, but we still think that's possible. An act of Congress can bolster it and bring it into law, and that changes everything. So we're happy to have these two things running in parallel, and we hope that they actually can work to support each other. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Thanks so much, Louise. And thank you to all of you who joined today and to those who also took action today. That's fantastic. So again, I mentioned we do have another upcoming member exclusive webinar in March. I put information in the chat, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you all for listening. It's always my pleasure.